Hello, smart people. Welcome to another lesson in my German Grammar for Beginners series. This is lesson number 8, and I thought this time I'm going to do maybe a 50-50 mix of a cultural lesson and a grammatical lesson, because actually grammatically you're not learning that much new, but I would like to explain to you how you can address people using those 3 different versions of you that exist in German language. And before we dive into that, let us compare together the solutions of the exercise of lesson number 7, because as you know, each lesson ends with an exercise section, and I will give you the solutions to the exercises at the beginning of the following lessons. So let's have a look at what our exercise asked us to do at the end of lesson 7. Here we wanted to choose either the verb mögen or another verb plus the adverb gern in order to fill the gaps here and create meaningful sentences. So let's start with number 1. Ich Schokolade. We are wanting to say I like chocolate. So what is it that we like here? It's an object, right? It is a thing. So Schokolade is the object of our desire. Definitely the object of mine. So we will use the verb mögen in its conjugated form. When you conjugate for first person singular, we will therefore say Ich mag Schokolade. Ich mag Schokolade. In sentence number 2, however, we would actually like to say that I like eating chocolate. So now it is an activity that we express a liking for, the activity of eating something. Okay, so when we talk about activities, meaning we want to say that we like a verb doing something, then we will say Ich esse gern Schokolade, because it is eating that we like doing. So we conjugate the verb essen for first person singular, ich esse, and then we add this adverb gern, which means gladly or willingly or with pleasure, immediately after the conjugated verb. Ich esse gern Schokolade, as opposed to ich mag Schokolade. Sentence number 3, we want to say we like traveling to France. Here again it is an activity that we like. What activity is it? What verb do we need? To travel. Okay, and we need to conjugate it for first person singular wir. Therefore we will say Wir reisen gladly, gern nach Frankreich. Wir reisen gern nach Frankreich. It is the activity of traveling that we enjoy. However, comparing that to sentence number 4, we want to say that we like French wine. Here again an object or a thing. Therefore we will use the verb mögen, which we conjugate for first person plural. Wir mögen französischen Wein. Wir mögen französischen Wein. Sentence number 5. We want to be asking, do you like playing chess? Okay, I think you got the gist of it now, right? It is an activity again that we like. Which verb is it that we need? The verb for to play. We already studied this one. It means spielen. We need to conjugate for second person singular du. So we will get Spielst du gern Schach? Spielst du gern Schach? So this is a little bit tricky because the sentence structure, of course, is going to be different in a question, in a yes-no question, from a normal statement, because now we need to start the question with the verb. It is a yes-no question. So we invert verb and subject, spielst du. Therefore, gern will no longer be immediately after the verb. It is going to come after the subject, in a question, mind you. Okay? Spielst du gern Schach? Spielst du gern Schach? And then the answer, yes, I like all games. This time again being an object or a thing that we like, games. So we will no longer say gern, we will say mögen. Ich mag alle Spiele. Ja, ich mag alle Spiele. I personally find this a really, really useful concept to teach early in the beginning, because this is what you will normally talk about with people, right? What do you like? Hey, what do you do in your free time? What do you like doing? That is small talk at its best, and I find it very useful to know when you need to use mögen and when you need to use gern, because it really makes the language sound very natural if you know how to use it well. So that was our exercise of lesson number 7. Now let's continue with the content of lesson number 8. And as I promised, I want to explain to you how you can address people properly and politely in German. You maybe already know that we have 3 different personal pronouns at our disposal here. That is the word category that we're speaking about. Du versus ihr versus sie. Which is which? When do you need what? Let's see. The German language differentiates between 3 different forms of addressing someone. The first one, du, like all of them mean you. When you translate into English, all of them are going to be translated as you. However, when we use du, we are addressing a single person informally. Okay, we're talking to someone whom we already know. We are acquainted with that person. Maybe we're friends. You're going to be using this with family members. Depending on your corporate culture, you might be using this with colleagues, however, definitely not on the first day. And you will normally need to wait for people to offer you the du. It is a bit risky to just talk to people in the du forms without having agreed on that, at least implicitly. You might run the risk of appearing a little bit impolite. However, when you are obviously not a native speaker and you obviously just started learning the language, so even if you use it incorrectly, people know that this concept is not familiar to speakers of all other languages, especially not English. So don't worry about that too much. If you do it wrong a couple of times, it's not going to be a big deal. But if you want to be perfect, and of course you do, because that's why you're watching my lessons, you will be using du for a person whom you are on acquainted, familiar terms with in an informal setting, and you're talking to one person only, okay? And this is exactly the difference to the second one, ihr, which in English sometimes is loosely translated as you guys. This is still in an informal context with people whom you know, but you're talking to more than one person. So let's say you're meeting a couple or a group of friends on the street, or you're talking to several of your family members. You will be addressing them with ihr, you guys. Now the last one is actually the easiest one to use, and it's the most useful one, and you kind of never really do anything wrong when you use it. Sie. Sie. And please pay attention, this personal pronoun is the only personal pronoun that is spelled with a capital letter in front. We need to spell the Sie that the word starts with a capital S, okay? Very important, because if you don't, then it's going to look like either they or she, okay? So German personal pronouns often take the same forms throughout declensions even, which can become very confusing if you use it incorrectly. So please try to remember that you need to spell this version of du with a capital S, very important. Still means Sie, but however this time we are talking in a more formal, polite, official context, and you can use it for either one person or more than one people. Okay, so let's say you're talking to a business partner or a customer, or you want to ask someone on the street how to get to the train station. You're going to be using Sie in order to address these people, quite irrespective of their age. So even if you're 80 years old and you're talking to a 20-year-old person, you are still going to be using Sie unless you're really talking to a child. So anyone who's old enough to sign a contract deserves to be talked to using Sie in the beginning. And as I said, it can be more than one person. You meet a group of clients, you're still going to be addressing them with Sie, you, in a formal context. So maybe a small extra cultural note on the side. How and when and who decides when to move from Sie to du? That is even tricky for Germans. In most of the cases, you are on the safe side if you wait for other people to offer you. Either they will say, wollen wir uns duzen? So you see, du, we turned that into a verb, we will say duzen, or siezen, to talk to someone in du or to talk to someone in sie, duzen and siezen. So either the person will directly offer you, shall we just say du, sollen wir uns duzen? Or they will tell you, call me Manfred, call me, and then they will tell you their first name. And what that usually means is if you use first names with someone, that automatically means you're going to be talking to them as du. It sounds very weird and awkward if you speak on the first name basis to someone, but still talk to them as sie. I think in American culture, for example, that is not weird because you will still be very formal and official with people in your company, but you will even sometimes address your boss with his first name, at least in movies they often do. In Germany, that doesn't work. To your bosses or superiors or people whom you want to keep a professional distance with, you will not use first names. That is very uncommon. So let's say you are not sure whether to use du or sie with someone who is older than you, wait for them. Normally, the older person will offer using du to the younger person. And also, although this is maybe a little bit traditional perspective, if you are a gentleman, wait for the lady to offer. It might be misunderstood if a man offers du to a woman of similar age. It might be misunderstood as flirting, unless you want to flirt, then you can do that, but you need to be prepared to get rejected if you do that too early. Maybe I'm going to do another flirting lesson anytime soon. Okay, so wait for the older person or the I'm superior in rank person. If you're talking about a professional company context, okay, then wait for the more senior superior person to offer du. And if people offer you their first names, that means you can talk to them as du now. But as nice as that might be socially speaking, it is going to be the more complicated grammatical conjugation. Okay, so you need to take that into consideration as well. So once you have decided whether to use du or ihr or sie with someone, now is the time to worry about conjugations. So when you address someone in du, you will need to conjugate the verb to the second person singular, obviously. If you talk to more than one person informally, you will conjugate for the second person plural. All very natural and understandable. The one thing that might not come as easily to you is the conjugation that you need for the formal sie, because even if you're obviously talking to just one person, you need a plural conjugation, which might feel a little bit awkward in the beginning, to some people at least. So you will need to conjugate the verb for the third person plural, which takes the same conjugation form as if you were talking about they. So yeah, if you want to ask someone formally, are you going to the cinema? Grammatically speaking, you will say, are they going to the cinema? And the person still understands that you're talking to them, not about someone else. But grammatically, you can't tell the difference. That is why you really need to spell the S with a capital S. Very important. So here are three verbs that we already studied together. The verb to be, to go, and to speak. Sein, gehen, and sprechen. These conjugations are not new to you, but I highlighted in bold the conjugations that you need for each of the speech levels that you use with people. So, du bist, du gehst, and du sprichst. Ihr seid, ihr geht, and ihr sprecht. So for regular verbs, you will just need to add the T, okay? T plus verbs, or verb stem plus T. Unless it is an irregular verb like sein, then the whole thing changes throughout all of the conjugations. Ihr seid, but ihr geht, ihr sprecht. And here, third person plural, you see we have sie with a minor s and sie with a capital S. But the conjugation is going to be the same for both they and you formal. Sie sind, sie gehen, sie sprechen. Okay, I think that's not too complicated, right? Let's have a look at some example sentences. Let's start with the verb to be in all three forms. If you address a single person informally, bist du Daniel? Bist du Daniel? For more than one person informally, seid ihr Sarah und Tina? Seid ihr Sarah und Tina? But now, to address someone in a formal, polite context, sind Sie, capital S, Herr Meier / Frau Meier, and this is how you will address someone if you don't use their first name. You will use their last name preceded by the form of address that corresponds to their gender. So Mr. Meier and Mrs. Meier sind Herr und Frau. Okay, so if you use sie with someone, you will address them with their last name with either Herr or Frau in front, and that is perfectly fine and polite to use with people. Okay, we do know, I think in previous times we did differentiate between Miss, Ms, and Mrs. Depending on whether a lady was married or not. We no longer do that. I've never Did I? Fräulein is a very derogatory term. We no longer use it. If you ever see it, you should feel insulted, so please don't study, okay? Yeah, next one. Gehen. Du gehst nach Hause. Du gehst nach Hause. Same thing in plural. Ihr geht ins Kino. Ihr geht ins Kino. Polite formal singular in plural. Sie gehen ins Büro. Sie gehen ins Büro. And for sprechen, to speak, sprichst du Deutsch? Okay, you will see that the first word ends in a T and the second word starts with a D. But we will not overly pronounce things like so clearly that you can hear the difference between the T and the D. We will say sprichst du as if it was one word and one single D. Sprichst du Deutsch? Sprecht ihr Englisch? Sprecht ihr Englisch? And then formally polite. Sprechen Sie Französisch? Sprechen Sie Französisch? So normally the names of languages will end in some form of ish. Okay, if you see something that looks like a country name followed by the ending ish, it is very likely that it's going to be the corresponding language. Französisch, Spanisch, Griechisch, Italienisch. Okay, just Deutsch. As always, we need to be an exception in everything. It is not Deutschländisch, it is Deutsch. Okay, sehr gut. And I have chosen the example sentences here specifically using questions, yes, no questions, because I also want you to get acquainted with and used to the inverted sentence structure in yes, no questions, inverting the verb and the subject. Okay, we switch their positions so that the verb is going to be in first place, followed by the subject in second place, as we do with yes, no questions. There's going to be a separate lesson on this, of course, yes, no questions and W questions. But I already want you to get somewhat used to them so that by the time we talk about it, you will say, I'm going to skip that lesson. I don't need it. Okay, so that was already the grammatical part. I hope I could shed some light on the cultural aspects of that as well. And of course, exercises. So I will introduce it to you, then you will get it as a small homework until next lesson. And at the beginning of lesson number 9, I'm going to give you the solutions. But what I want you to do here is add the correct conjugated verb. Surprise, surprise. That's how it's always been in my lessons until now. And I want you to use the English translations as an aid in order to identify which verb you need. But I want to give you one piece of advice, not just for this lesson, but for learning German in general, especially if you're an English native speaker. Do not try to translate word by word. It will not work. You will be able to make yourself understood, but you will not sound accurate. And if you do that too early on, too consistently, you will foster a habit of translating that is going to be very difficult for you to eliminate later on. So if you get into the habit of translating from your own language, just replacing vocabulary items, it is not going to make sense in German once you reach more complex grammatical structures. So please do not try to do this. I'm specifically referring to sentence number 8 down here. Let's have a look at this one together, okay? Du morgen Geburtstag. And we want to be saying the meaning of it is going to be your birthday tomorrow. First problem is we do not have present continuous. We have no grammatical tense corresponding to anything that ends with an ing. I am reading and I read is the same in German, okay? The context differentiates the translation in English, but we do not have this ing form. So don't try to twist the verb into something that it cannot be. Also, in the English translation, we need it is your birthday tomorrow. In German, we say you have tomorrow birthday. When you translate that word by word, it sounds incredibly stupid. So when I try to translate word by word from German to English, I'm going to sound like a child, of course. If you do that from English to German, you're just as well going to sound like a child. So please don't get into the habit of that. Try to remember which words go together. So please just read through the example sentences a couple of times, even though you've done the exercises already, and try to remember which verbs you need in which context and what goes together with which noun. Try to form an intuition about word choice So translation is a good indicator of the words that you need, but it will not get you to a proficient professional level. I'm not trying to be discouraging here. I would like you to speak as naturally as possible. So I will always try to include some advice from my teaching practice that I found might be useful to you in your learning journey. Okay, so I'm looking forward to comparing this exercise with you at the beginning of lesson number 9. Thank you once again for watching until the end. You already know that. If you need my lesson material, write me an email here. You will get the PDFs from me, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in the next lesson. Thank you very much, everybody. See you soon. Tschüss.